In this video, we're going to cover the absolute most basic muscle skills and practices that we need to know in order to effectively control our ejaculation response. The first one is a very well-known technique called a Kegel exercise, or in Tantra, we might use the yogic term, which is Mula Bandha. The Mula Bandha, or a Kegel exercise, is when we do a muscle contraction of the muscle system that's in our pelvic floor. This muscle system ranges from the back of our body around our anus to the front of our body around our genitals. It's quite literally a full pelvic floor squeeze upward. You can even try doing it right now. If you're having a difficult time getting it, just know it's the same muscles that you use to stop the flow of urine when you're going to the bathroom. The more well-rounded the muscle contraction is in our pelvic floor, meaning the more that we incorporate all of those muscles there, the more skilled that we're going to get at our ejaculation control. This technique, when done well, alone is enough to be able to help control our ejaculation response. But first, we have to build the muscle. This can take time, as we all have different muscle strengths there, just like how we all have different levels of strength in our arms and legs. A good measuring stick is if you can hold this muscle lock for a minute, your muscle is well on the way to being strong enough. If you have difficulty, like for example, when I first started this practice, I could only hold it for about 5 seconds before it started getting fatigued and a little bit sore. But over time, it builds and grows just like any muscle. The good news is that you can do this exercise any time of the day that you're awake, anywhere. I'm even doing it right now and you don't even know about it. It's so discreet that you can literally work it out all the time. When this muscle is strong enough, what you can do is when you are reaching that point of no return, or even when you spill over into ejaculation past the point of no return, you can use this muscle lock to stop the flow of semen traveling through your inner pathways out your lingam. This isn't a perfect technique, as there are some things that can go wrong in our inner tubing. Something that can happen is the ejaculation passes through our inner passages, then we do the muscle lock, but it has traveled a significant amount of distance so that it reaches a certain point in our inner canals. The tubing for our ejaculation is very close to the tubing for our urine. So what can happen is when we're ejaculating, if we're pulling on these muscles upward into our body, we pinch off the flow of ejaculation from leaving our body, but it can actually go into our bladder instead. This is fine and doesn't have any harmful health consequences, but what it can do is give you the sensation like you have to go to the bathroom. You'll simply just pee out the ejaculation along with your urine, and then it's business as usual. Life goes on. If your ejaculation makes it through your inner canals to this extent, it might still trigger that part of our system that will cause you to lose your erection. The good news is that we're not necessarily losing a significant amount of vitality, but we're still not quite there yet, as a part of the objective of this practice for many people is to preserve their ejaculation and make love for longer. If you are at this phase, or you find yourself arriving at this phase, you deserve a huge congratulations, because it does take practice to even get to this point. And so it's good to acknowledge where we're at and celebrate the small wins along the way. Something that's important to acknowledge through the Taoist perspective is there's a value on the yang and the yin side of the practice. The yang or yang means the active, assertive part, and the yin means the relaxed, passive part. The Taoist teachings talk about how our root area, our perineum, the area between our genitals and our anus, is like a riverbed. When we have too much pressure at the bottom of the riverbed, it can form a hardened clay. That's analogous for creating muscle tension in our root. So we want to be careful to balance that active muscle contraction, especially when we're practicing and exercising, with a relaxation period. So when we're doing this exercise, we want to go all the way into the yang, an active, assertive muscle hold and contraction, then take the time to relax the muscle sufficiently afterwards. We definitely don't want muscle tension in our genital area when we're trying to learn this practice, because it's the relaxedness and the ability to allow our energy channels to be free flowing that will support doing this practice well. There's 2 ways that I recommend doing Kegel exercises when you're practicing, and one of them is a series of rapid contractions in sets of 10. So do 10 rapid contractions as fast as you can, and then relax for an equal amount of time. And then do 5 sets of this exercise, 10 quick muscle contractions, and then relax it for the same amount of time that it takes you to do those contractions. The other one is where you practice holding it upward and pulling your perineum, pulling your root upwards and holding it there for as long as you can. I like both of these exercises, and ultimately I recommend doing a balance of both, but you can try it out for yourself and choose your own adventure with whichever one you prefer. The next body level practice that we're going to talk about is the $1 million spot. Now, a little bit of a history lesson. This is called the $1 million spot because it was such a highly coveted secret at one point that it was only revealed by spiritual masters to the wealthy elite. Why would this technique be saved for only the wealthy elite? Because the Taoists knew that the more that we retain our semen and do not ejaculate it outward, the more we retain that precious vital life force that's inherent within it. Taoists view our ejaculation fluid as this supercharged, spiritually potent body fluid that when we release, we actually lose life force. My personal experience can back this up because often when I ejaculate, I feel really tired. And if I ejaculate frequently, either multiple times in the same day or multiple days sequentially in a row, I notice that I start to feel really fatigued, lethargic, unmotivated, and like I would rather spend my time relaxing, recharging, and just watching TV or something like that. However, when I notice that I have sexual encounters or I do self-pleasure where I do not ejaculate multiple times or multiple days in a row, and I'm preserving that vital life force inside my body, after a few days, I feel like I start to become supercharged with energy, and I feel like I have all of this extra energy to burn off that I can put towards either my creative pursuits, my passions, my hobbies, or my businesses. In earlier days, the Taoist masters and the wealthy emperors knew that if they had a whole bunch of supercharged civilians, that it would risk the power position of the emperor. Early emperors forbid common civilians from knowing this technique because they knew of its inherent power. So that's why it's called the $1 million spot. It also speaks to the profundity of this technique that we're working with and how blessed are we to be able to have conversations like this, as well as have multiple books out on this subject. When it comes to learning sexual mastery, it's a really great time to be alive right now. The $1 million spot is a place on our body, on the perineum, right in between our pearl sac and our anus. And the technique is when the urge to ejaculate is coming on, you push into the spot. It takes a little bit of practice to find it, but we'll show you here in a diagram. When you're ejaculating, if you push on this spot, you will pinch off the inner canal that our ejaculation fluid travels through. The result is you will experience that pleasurable muscle spasm while retaining the ejaculation fluid. Boom, non-ejaculative orgasm. In order to do this technique successfully, you need to touch the right spot, but you also need to push a significant amount of pressure. Not too hard because we don't want to create some type of pain trauma there, but we need to push hard enough so that it actually effectively pinches off our inner canals. A good rule of thumb is you want to depress the skin about an inch in towards your body, or somewhere around your first knuckle. If you push with that level of force and it doesn't work, you might want to try pushing a little bit harder the next time. I've tried this technique multiple times and it does work. However, it's not my personal favorite. The reason being is because we're not actually creating a long-term transformational impact on our bodies and systems. I much prefer the expanded techniques that we're going to go over in the next several videos because it actually creates that long-lasting transformation. We literally retrain our nervous system to equate sexual stimulation to retaining energy versus sexual stimulation and releasing energy. Our body is highly sensitive to repeating patterns, and we really start to win this game when our body starts to acknowledge that we're circulating the energy through our body rather than releasing it outward. This takes time and practice, and if we stay exclusively on Kegels or the $1 million spot, while that may be effective in the short term, it's less effective in the long term. I like to view the $1 million spot and Kegel exercises as a more beginner or basic practice, but what I'm really passionate about are the more expanded practices. So let's get into those.